your lives.
All right, guys, my name is Dustin Phillips. If you have any questions while you're here today, feel free to let me know. But you're currently here at the birthplace of Ivy Green, or the birthplace of Helen Keller, called Ivy Green. The reason why it has this name is because of all the English ivy that was growing here on the property with David and Mary Keller. That's Helen's grandparents. They migrated here in 1820 as part of the Westward Expansion Act. If you think about it, in 1820, our country's only about 50 years old, so the country's trying to move out of those original 13 colonies towards that Louisiana Purchase, so they're going towards the Mississippi River. And David and Mary Keller took advantage of what was called a land act. Land acts were where they were giving away tracts of land, and they, meaning the federal government, to help people with their migration efforts. And so they were part of the railroad system where they came from in Virginia, and they saw this as an economic opportunity to help expand the railroad this side of the Allegheny Mountains and connect it towards the Mississippi River. And David and Mary actually established the Tuscumbia Railway in 1830, just 10 years after they established here. This home was built in 1820, and it was the second home to be built in Tuscumbia at its time. But this home is older than the town of Tuscumbia and the county of Colbert County. This home is 205 years old this year, actually. And it is the oldest structure still standing in Tuscumbia. Now, this region that you're in is called the Shoals. It's comprised of Florence, Muscle Shoals, Sheffield, and Tuscumbia, with Florence being the oldest, right across the Tennessee River, founded in 1818. But this area over here was extremely rural, and there wasn't many people living on this side of the Tennessee River at the time. So when they established roots here, this was a 640-acre self-sustaining cotton plantation, and it was just pretty much their family here in Tuscumbia. But shortly after, they did help pioneer the town of Tuscumbia. Now, on the 640-acre tract of land, they had many slaves that served here on the property, but they also had 10 total children. And out of their 10 children, I really talk about this one right here, Captain Arthur Keller. The reason why I speak about him is because he's the one that actually inherits all of this property. Captain Keller was born in 1836, so 16 years after this home was constructed, and he inherited it around the time of the American Civil War. We know the American Civil War was 1861 to 1865, and Captain Keller served as the captain of the Confederacy during the American Civil War. And so during that time, he allowed this home to serve as a hospital for Union and Confederate troops. Now, fun fact for you, right across the Tennessee River is Florence. It was mostly Union occupied for most of the Civil War. So I always like to point that out to people as to why Union and Confederate troops were served here in this hospital. Now, after the American Civil War, Captain Keller did lose a lot of this land due to war debt and weariness. Obviously, the Confederacy lost, and so those railroads his parents built were destroyed. With the end of the Civil War, slavery was considered abolished. The crops were not being tended to, plus there was just a lot of war debt that was accrued. So Captain Keller ended up losing over 400 acres of that 640-acre tract of land, dwindling it down to 200, and today we sit on 10. Now, in 1867, Captain Keller realized he was a very failed businessman, and there was only one way that he was ever going to solve that, and that was to find a woman, because women fix everything. So in 1867, he married his first wife, and her name was Sarah, and they had 2 sons together, William and James. You'll see their bedroom upstairs and on the right in just a moment. But after about 10 years of marriage, she did unfortunately pass away from an unknown illness, leaving Captain Keller with 2 sons he really didn't know how to raise. So Captain Keller did what most men would have done, and he remarried. But this time he went to Memphis, Tennessee, and he found at the time 22-year-old Miss Kate Adams. She was half of his age, and she is a Southern Memphis belle. She's very well educated, very influential, and she's a descendant of John Adams and John Quincy Adams, our 2nd and 6th presidents of the United States. These 2 marry, and they come back here to Tuscumbia, Alabama, and that year is 1878. And just 2 years later, Helen Keller was born in the cottage right next door. That used to be Captain Keller's office, but he made that her bedroom and called it a bridal suite when she came. And Helen was born over there on June the 27th of 1880. Helen was born a neurotypical child. She didn't have any exceptionalities, but before her 2nd birthday, she contracted a high fever that lasted for 3 days. And on the 3rd day, that's what caused her to lose her vision and her hearing. So it wasn't genetics, it was all an illness. Now, naturally, Helen used behavior to communicate her wants and her needs, and that behavior got progressively worse over time. It wasn't until her sister Mildred was born in 1886 that the family realized just how unsafe this home had become, because Helen had never had to share the attention of her mother until that newborn came. And Helen was quite aggressive towards her. Helen required a lot of additional attention, and her parents realized that this home was very unsafe. We need somebody to help. And that help would come in the form of a teacher. And so, hey guys, if you'll give me just a second, I'll be right there with you. And so that help would come in the form of a teacher, and that teacher would become Miss Ann Sullivan. Now, Ann Sullivan was a student at the Perkins Institute of the Blind in Watertown, Massachusetts. She was a student there, but she was also an immigrant, and they were offering $25 a month for a teacher to come here into the home, into Tuscumbia, and they were offering full room and board. Well, the Kellers had written a letter to the school where she attended, and the school didn't have a teacher that they could send, but they had this recent high school graduate who had no family, no job, and no home. And so this was actually going to be a great new beginning for her. So the school convinced her to accept the position, and the Kellers were thrilled. They knew a teacher was coming. They were excited for the help that they were about to get, but what they didn't realize that they had just hired a 20-year-old, smart-mouth, Irish, no offense, Yankee, who happened to also be blind. They felt so deceived. It was like ordering off Temu because they thought they were getting a teacher for the blind, but in reality, they had the blind to come lead the blind. But who better to teach than someone that's actually lived through it themselves? So their journey starts off extremely rough, but it evolves into a pretty amazing testimony that we know today. And so that's the beginning of their story.
You said high fever.
Yes.
Did she have the measles?
So looking back, they either think it was meningitis or scarlet's fever, but at the time they called it brain fever, which was a common death for most people in that time period.
I was always told it was the measles.
Meningitis or scarlet's fever, one or the other. We don't really know which one. So
When did she pass away?
Helen passed away on June the 1st of 1968. She was 26 days shy of her 88th birthday, and her, Ann Sullivan, and her other primary caregiver, Polly Thompson, are all entombed in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And you can see their photograph right here.
Now, when did Annie pass?
She passed away in 1936, and she passed away as Ann Sullivan Macy because she actually married a Harvard instructor named Mr. John Macy.
Okay. So now we can just go around any place we want. Okay.
And your brochure will give you a lot of information.
All right. Thanks, Dustin.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for your patience. I'm going to let these people in. All right, guys. Everyone over. And then we will get started